Good day. Some of you may know I write a newsletter called Wide World of News. Well, for the next 2 weeks, get ready for the wide world. Sean, Dan, and I are going to take you through the whole world, and I'll be here where you see behind me, famous landmark. Welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us as we start the week. Sean, the world awaits. How did Team Spicer do in your two championship matches over the weekend?
We went 1-for-1. The girls are
One for
CYO.
one for two. One for
One
two.
for two. Yeah. Sorry, 1-for-2. Girls, champs. Boys, runner up.
How close did the boys get?
They got it closer in the second half, but
Yeah.
it,
All right.
it,
There is no I in team. How did the individual Spicer athletes do?
my daughter's a bit sidelined with an ACL tear. So this was a full bench ride, and
Okay.
my son played well. Good
Okay.
ball handling. Shots not as high percentage as we'd like him in the hoop.
All right, Dan, all we care about is if we finish. You share your time if you wish, but how'd you do in your half marathon?
I did great. I did 138, which was about what I probably thought about where I'd be. It was foggy as I've ever seen a race. Unfortunately, you could not see off the Brooklyn Bridge at all, which was a bummer. But it was great. A lot of fun.
All right. Well, all right. Welcome in, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. As always, we'll run through the news, kick things around, and then take your questions and comments. If you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your electronic hand if you'd like to get into the conversation. Don't make me threaten to cancel the program, please. We'd like some first-timers always. And we love and welcome our returning hand raisers. And if you're watching on X or YouTube, I'll say again, don't put smack in the chat. It's that simple. I know a lot of you will, and a lot of you continue to misunderstand what this platform's about. This platform is about all voices. And if somebody says something you disagree with, say Sean or Dan. Don't say, I'll never watch the show again. Say, thank goodness there's a place where I can listen to opposing views and get a better sense of what the other side's thinking and maybe get a little better understanding and unity, peace, love, and understanding and presumption of grace for all. With that, here's what's happening today. President of the United States is going to the Kennedy Center at 2:45, where he, according to his schedule, will participate in a board meeting with Rick Grinnell, frequent visitor to the two-way platform, who's now the acting head of the Kennedy Center. And he's there for 2 hours and 5 minutes. The only thing on his public schedule, Sean's successor, Caroline Leavitt, more about her later in the program, briefs at 1 o'clock. So, Sean, what do you know about what the president's doing over at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts for 2 hours and 5 minutes?
I know that there's a meeting, as you mentioned. I think there's also a bit of a tour to check it out. I don't recall the president going there during his first term. I could be mistaken. So I'm not sure he's actually been there previously. So I'll give him a tour. The president actually at each of the theaters, but particularly in that main theater, has a box, which, he can go to if he chooses. Normally it's staff, senior folks, whatever. It's dead center. But the president during his first term didn't even attend the Kennedy Center honors. So I think this, at least to my recollection, will be his first time there. They'll tour him through the various theaters and obviously probably show him his own, the box the president has reserved for him.
Yeah.
Sean, will he be the interior designer in chief? I mean, are we talking rugs and, wall hangings, everything here?
It's a good question. If you go in the president's box, they've got the jumbo photos and they decorate it in the style. I went during Bush and Trump. It's not like massive, but it's got a little ante room and a bathroom and a little kitchenette. And then you walk out into the main area. I assume, who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if he adds some decor to it.
Given that he wasn't a DC guy before he was president, isn't it possible he's never been to the Kennedy Center?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know that he's ever been.
But I mean, even not just as president, even before that, because he just didn't go to DC very often.
Right. And certainly not for a show.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And obviously we'd all appreciate, and particularly those of us with evening programs, if he held one of his rolling press conferences at the Kennedy Center. And as you know,
I can confirm it's a tour and a board meeting.
Yeah. So it's interesting because this is one of the symbolic things that he's changed. A bunch of artists have said, including the creators of Hamilton, that they're not going to play in Donald Trump's Kennedy Center. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. It's substantive and symbolic. All right, let's put up the pool for Sean to quickly
I will say we went last night in advance of him to see the last show of Riverdance. He will enjoy his time there. Great show, by the way. It's headed to New York for a few days at Radio City. So take
better.
part if you can.
Nothing better than a rinse. Sean, anything catch your eye on today's White House pool?
Hold on. I believe I can't see it because there's a chat that blocking it, but I believe Semaphore is the new media.
Yeah,
that's that. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So that to me, and then EWTN is the secondary. That's the Catholic news feed, news channel. So those are the two that probably wouldn't have gotten any love in the past.
Yeah.
And the interesting is,
so I don't know what the
guys
vice
know. I
president-
mean, Semaphore is, is just not a member of the White House Correspondents Association, but it is, I would hardly call it conservative media. It's run by Ben Smith, formerly of Politico and the New York Times. I mean, so one of the things that's interesting in this pool, as we talk about it, is it's not been the traditional Axios held the new media seat. And so it's just people who aren't members of the White House Correspondents Association.
That's right. All right. I don't know what the vice president's doing. Anybody know? I don't know. And the Congress is out till the 24th, so another week. But Sean, you were right. He was in the Midwest over Friday, and they just didn't make that big a deal about it. All right. Over the weekend.
No, wait, he is. Oh God, I knew where he is today too, but it slipped my mind.
All right. Try to come up with it. Over the weekend, lots of stories, including in the major newspapers, about particularly DOGE and the tariffs, and a concern that the Trump administration is completely lost the thread here on how to make the economy grow. There are some dissenting voices. Put up the Lloyd Blankfein quote. If you read all the coverage, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Financial Times, Washington Post, etc., you'll see mostly stories that say DOGE is crushing the economy and hurting America, and certainly the tariffs are being done in a haphazard way, not focused on rebuilding the economy. But occasionally you'll run across a quote like this. Lloyd Blankfein, former head of Goldman Sachs, quote, "When you look at these policies in a macro way, they have a method to them. The risk to the markets is dislocation in the short term, but I think our republic will be better off if we spend a few $1,000s more for a car in return for having a workforce that can make things and can afford what they make." I'm not sure everyone in America would agree with Lloyd Blankfein that they'd be fine paying several $1,000s more for a car, and that is a dissenting view. So, Sean, I start with you. I talked to smart people all weekend. Smart people, super smart, geniuses, experience in government and politics and business. Some who said this thing's right on track. They agreed with Lloyd Blankfein. And some who say this is the most chaotic, shambolic, crazy start to an administration. If they want to talk about tax cuts and energy and regulation reform, great. But leading with tariffs, going aggressively at tariffs over things like border and fentanyl is pure nutso. How can it be that smart people have such polar opposite views about what's happening?
Oh, that's easy. I think that there's too many people that are sucked into the establishment, that they think that, Republican or Democrats stay within the confines of a certain road. I've said this before, and I'll repeat it just for newbies, but Trump has used these 4 years out of office and his team, America First Policy, Heritage, whatever, to think about what will we do to make the country better, to manufacture more and all this, if we have the chance, and how would we do it? This is not a tinker around the edges kind of administration. These guys mean it when they say they want fundamental change, and they're going to make it. And that's the problem. Too many folks in I see this every day around the Washington area, whether you're talking about defense policy, health policy, or tariffs, they all think that somehow it's not going to happen. He can't possibly mean this. This won't. And they are so fundamentally wrong about how this president is approaching things. So the answer is that too many people have their head stuck in the establishment and don't think outside the box like this administration is about to.
Dan, is this just a matter, as Sean suggests, of establishment versus anti-establishment?
I think it's whether or not you see this historic change is going to work. I mean, to some extent, what Sean is saying, Trump is going big across the board, and he is continuing to flood the zone with really historic change. And, we've said it on the show, like if it works, Trump is going to be potentially on Mount Rushmore. And if it doesn't, he's going to be in trouble. And so I think, for the Lloyd Blankfein quote, it's similar to the Scott Bessick quote last week, which is they're all admitting prices will rise. The question is that trade-off for more expensive goods and services worth it to potentially create a greater domestic manufacturing base? Like, can both things be true? And we're going to find out. There are a lot of, as you say, very smart people who are incredibly skeptical that at the end of the day, that can really happen.
You know, we talked about this last week, I think briefly. There's a billionaire mentality, which is most people, first generation billionaires, when you talk to them, they've been told no, you can't do that. That will never work. It has never been tried that way. And they have found success because they were willing to color outside the lines, break the mold. And Trump fundamentally believes that. And so many of the people surrounding him right now believe that, which is, you know, you geniuses who have tried it over and over again the same way have done nothing but get us deeper and deeper into debt and allowed the manufacturing base to go outside the United States, et cetera. So maybe we try it our way, but it's a fundamental shift in mentality that exists and way of thinking by so many of these folks, not only President Trump, but people around him.
I mean, look, I think the one difference with that is between the private sector and the public sector. So the public sector has to keep delivering services every day, all day, to the complete spectrum of constituents. The private sector, when you're starting up a company or you try to have radical change, you can afford to kind of, you know, mess up a little bit, have customers that are upset, lose some customers kind of in your effort to shift. That is just not what the federal government does. Although, but to your point, Sean, that is where they're going. And the question is like, can you do it? Can you build
but also remember,
in
it's
midair?
the mentality,
Yep.
right? So I get what you're saying and you're right. But part of this is also, there's a mentality that says, you know, we're not going to keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yep.
And also just fundamentally, we deserve better, right? And it's funny how many clips I saw over the weekend of Obama talking about putting Biden in charge and how many stupid federal programs we have and how many buildings that need to get sold off. This has been tried before, right?
Yeah.
It's just never succeeded. And I think Trump is approaching this with a much more private sector mentality than has ever been used before.
All I'll say, and then I want to move to a related topic, is two things can be true at once. It can be that Trump is very smart, and as Dan suggested, maybe historic, to try new things and to not say, I'm not going to try new even risky things because the old ways aren't working and America's in a long-term decline economically and people should feel their kids can do better than they did, or at least as well. That can be true, but it can also be true that what they're doing specifically with tariffs and maybe DOGE, but certainly tariffs, could be ridiculously stupid. Both those things could be true. Yep. 80% of the people I know think the second thing. And a lot of people I know think both things. They're glad for the effort, but they just think the way it's being executed is not smart. All right, presidential poll numbers. If you're running for election, they matter. If you need to have sway with your own party, they matter. Because if you're not popular, your base and the people in your party in Congress may not vote your way. Or you need a sense of momentum. I don't think Trump needs any of those things. He's not running for re-election. The party and the base are with him, and he's got a ton of momentum. So, Dan, does it matter what Trump's poll numbers are? There's some polls over the weekend, and both sides pointed to things that look good or bad. I don't think it matters, but what do you think?
I mean, I think what you said in the beginning there still applies, which is right now Trump has an iron grip on his party. Nobody, not even the Freedom Caucus, who has bedeviled, presidents and speakers for, 2 generations, want to cross him. But the reason they want to cross him is he's at 90 some odd % with the GOP, and you don't want to get crosswise with him. If his numbers soften, let's just say tariffs and DOGE kind of start to backfire. Sean, you made the point by this summer, if inflation starts to take off, if there's real economic pain, Trump's grip will loosen because it is likely that working class voters will begin to say, we're not happy and we want to see something change. And that would create some distance where members of Congress, who really all politics is local, their number one issue is getting reelected, may start to say it is a safe move to separate myself from him. But as long as he's strong, that won't happen.
Yep. Just to be clear, I meant to add this. His numbers will matter as we get closer to the midterms. I just mean for like the next 6 months. Sean, if the president said to you, Sean, I'm so upset my poll numbers have dropped, what would you say?
Well, I'd say a couple things. Stand by. Because first of all, I will say this. One, there's no way, in my opinion, that his poll numbers will drop to any level that would matter prior to this. The base is solidly with him. Let me just the Washington. I mean, so his base is solid behind him. And the thing that's interesting to your point is, yeah, he's not running for re-election. That's what's so beautiful. Normally, people would say he's a lame duck. Let's go out there and freelance, or But the idea that we're in a second term with a president that can't run for re-election, he's got this grip on the party, speaks to the power of this base. Let me give you three things from the NBC poll. Right direction of the country right now, 44%. November, just a few months ago, is 27. That's almost a 20% rise in right track, one of the highest levels since 2004, right? That's amazing. Trump in April of 2017, just a few days from now, 8 years ago, 50% approval among Republicans. Okay, it's 74 that say that he's very positive. That's a 24-point plus from the first term where he was before. And then secondly, here's the other thing. It's one thing, like any game, it's not just you and how your team doing, it's your opponent. Democratic Party right now is at 27% in the NBC poll, 29 in the CNN poll. 27 is a historic low. Never before has the Democratic Party polled that low. So not only is it Trump ascent within his own party, the Democratic Party is just crippled and pathetic and lame. And the idea right now is that, hey, I don't even have to be that great. You guys are just that bad.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Yeah.
Do we lose Mark? Yeah, I mean, look, I think. Oh, sorry, Mark, we lost you for a minute.
Real
Dan, back to you.
Yeah. Okay.
thing. No, you hear what? No, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, look, the Democratic
ahead,
Party is at a low point. Last week, obviously, did not help. We're going to get to it here when we talk about Senator Schumer, but. It is true that there's a lot of strong polling that Trump can point to that you just did, Sean. There's also strong polling that's now very consistent that he is softening on the economy. I mean, he is underwater. And so while the Democratic Party is a, debacle right now, if I'm a Democrat, as I am, I look at those numbers on the economy and say, there is opportunity.
All right.
Yeah,
quick,
but the problem is that his base is rock solid with him.
Yep.
They love this stuff. I mean, look, Mark talks about brilliant people that he's with all weekend. I've been talking to folks on the base from the sort of all over, just sort of how, and I love just asking, how do you think he's doing? There is no equivocation.
Yep.
People are excited. And to the Lloyd Liefeld quote in that story, people, I mean, it's amazing the number of people that I talk to that are directly in the line of the tariffs that are saying to me, it's worth some short-term pain if we get long-term benefit. There
are some, but there are plenty of dissenters too, because I don't think it's going to work.
The core. I mean, yeah, sure, but
no,
Mark,
within the core. I'm not talking to people from Center for American Progress. I'm talking about people who are very big Trump supporters who even think tariffs can work, but don't think tariffs targeted at fentanyl and the border are going to work. They long for Lighthizer, whose tariff view was more traditional about if you believe tariffs can work. One thing from each of you, Dan first, what's the next thing that could happen on the economy that Trump could point to and say, see, it's working? Not 5 years from now, but what's something that could happen soon?
Yeah, I think major announcements, deals, M&A, expansion, major capital investment, because what you're hearing people say is, because we're so uncertain about the future, we're going to hold money, hold off on decisions. So the more that's announced, it says, you know what, our long-term view is things are going to be good.
John.
So I actually think there's a tip that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said over the weekend that's important when we think of tariffs. It's not a one-sided thing. We raise them and that's it. It's the other side can take them down. And I would tell you that as April 2nd approaches, which is this day that they're basically going to list all of their trade grievances. It's trade festivus. All of the trade, not tariff and non-tariff barriers are going to get listed down and say, this is the problem we have with every country around the world. What's going to happen is a lot of countries, probably the smaller ones, just in fairness, will announce that they're taking down their tariffs. And the administration will hold them up as a sign of success. So I agree with Dan. There'll be talk about investment in the United States. But there'll also be some early success stories about other countries taking down their tariff schedules. And the administration will be able to point to them and say, see, That's what we want to happen. It's not just us raising, but we went to 5% tariff on fill in the blank product. Fill in the blanks, Uzbekistan took theirs down to 0. We took ours down, win-win, right? So they're going to be pointing to how this policy is working.
All right. Again, if you want in on the conversation, please raise your hand. Let's switch to Democrats. Sean mentioned the historically bad poll number. CNN, same thing. The Democratic Party is at an extreme low point in terms of how people are thinking about them. The base is unhappy. The moderates are unhappy. I thought what happened last week, if it had happened to Republicans, would have gotten a lot more coverage, where you had the Democratic leader in the House not being willing to offer his support in a press conference. The Democratic leader in the Senate, he said, next question. Nancy Pelosi blasting Schumer, and even two folks who appear regularly on two-way, Ro Khanna and Richie Torres, more moderate Democrats, blasted Schumer as well on X and said, this isn't leadership. Obviously, AOC and others on the left have too. So,
well, also, by the way, the tepid responses from everything from Chris Murphy to Sheldon Whitehouse that weren't ringing endorsements. They weren't like, we stand behind him. They were like,
yes,
he's technically the leader now.
He's okay for now. So, Dan, is this like a bump in the road for Schumer, who's on a book tour now, and he's going to face a lot of protests on his book tour? Is this, and questions from reporters as he tries to promote his book, which is on anti-Semitism, is this a bump in the road for Schumer, or the beginning of the end of his leadership, or something in between?
And by the way, awkward, tonight he's being interviewed by Richie Torres here in New York. So Department of Timing. I think it's to be determined, because I think what Schumer is facing now for the first time in his kind of 40-year rise, Schumer was always known both in the House and when he became kind of Harry Reid's right hand in the Senate as the smartest political person in the room. That he understood, every state, that he was always on the phone. He was always talking to the base, that he really studied districts, and that he understood who was the right candidate for that state. He was unafraid to back them, and then a lot of them ended up winning. Now, for the first time, what you're beginning to hear, and it's not just from the AOCs of the world, but even from people who have been staunch defenders, is he's old, he's slow, and he's kind of a little bit afraid right now, that he's so concerned about preserving himself that he's not really acting and doing anything to get the party. He's not leading. And that's a danger zone for Chuck Schumer right now, that people are increasingly saying, you don't understand today, but you were really good yesterday.
So, Dan, you stole I literally was waiting to use the phrase danger zone, because for a different reason, though. When you go out and do a book tour, and you referenced it with Richie Torres today, you have to do interviews to promote them, right? Your publicist to set them all up. So you can't hide the way you normally could after a bad weekend, where you could just sort of go into, have a bunch of meetings or whatever. This is a danger zone for him, because he has to do the interviews, and he's going to get asked awkward questions over and over again. And this is where people tend to slip up. These kind of interviews that you're not used to, because you're doing non-traditional things, because you're promoting a book, not a policy. So you're going to outlets and to shows that you normally wouldn't. You're dealing with people who aren't normally questioning you about the motion to recommit or some inside baseball thing. So I think this entire next week, when he's out there, is a danger zone for him, because the level of question that he's going to get is not what he's, it's sort of like the pitch speed switches up. So it's not that you're not a good hitter. It's just that you're not used to hitting, a real slow ball from someone who, or a curveball necessarily, or whatever. But he's, I think, going to have a very difficult week. And I just, at his age and what he's used to, this is the kind of week where he could slip up and potentially see the end of him by the end of the week.
Well, and the other problem for Schumer is, and this is just understanding the modern media environment. Everyone agrees that for 30 years, Chuck Schumer understood media better than any Democrat, really. But look at what he did the last few weeks. He told the base, we're going to fight. I'm with you. I understand your energy. And he was telling everybody in private, this is not going to happen. This is not the place to do it. The politics aren't. And he almost thought that the right and the left hands would never find out about what he was saying to the other, when it was all over X. It was all over town. I mean, because he doesn't understand this. I mean, the guy still uses a flip phone. He just does not really understand the way that the world is changing around him. And that is a danger zone, to your point, Sean, as he goes out.
The difference that I see where Schumer screwed up is that I think he made the right call. And fair enough, I'm buying. Like, in other words, there was no play.
No, of course he did. Of course he did.
No, okay.
Of course he did.
But
Not even
here's
disputable.
Right. Okay, he made the right play. We're all in visceral agreement on that. Where I think if I were a Democrat, I'd be pissed is exactly what Dan said. You told me to fight. I went out there to fight, and you knew I was going to die. Right? That's the problem, is that you now question his strategy, which was always his strength.
It's still not clear to me. It's still not clear to me what he thought was going to happen when he said they don't have the votes.
If you're a Dem, and this is what Dan was saying, is that I'm like, wait a second, you told me to charge the hill and you knew we could never take it. Why did you do that? And then, by the way, when we're halfway up the hill, you go, hey, come back.
But you know what the thing is? And I wrote this.
Meet me at Junior's for cheesecake.
I mean, I wrote this on Substack last night. Fight is not a strategy. They had no strategy going into the CR. We did not spend weeks laying the predicate of what we were fighting for. It was the opposite. We're like, this is not the hill we're going to die on. And I think why everyone is so angry is it's the same thing for everything else with Donald Trump. We have no strategy for any of the shock and awe, other than to say the base says fight, which is a rally cry, and stop Trump. But the number one thing in a strategy is goals, and we have no goals.
Yeah, I was talked out of thinking that Trump was the Democrats were in dire straits after the election. Steve Elmendorf and others, and Doug Sosnick and others convinced me no. And instead, it seems like they're in bigger trouble now than they were even after the election, because time has passed and the internal fissures, they are dramatic. I mean, to have Pelosi attacking Schumer is quite something, Sean.
But this needs to happen.
Her former top aide, Ashley Etienne, said, to beat Trump, we need clarity of purpose, discipline, and coordination. It's clear none of that exists right now. They are airing this in public in a way that is
Pelosi herself practically said it.
I know. But here's the thing, though, guys. It's not just Chuck Schumer. Hakeem Jeffries had his strategy was that Mike Johnson would screw up, and they would have to come to us. But we had no idea what we were going to leverage. He's
gotten off easy. He's gotten off easy.
I mean, the whole party has no strategy.
Yeah.
So this is a good conversation.
One more topic, and then we're going to get to your hand raises, maybe two, depending on how long it takes the first one. If you want to get in the conversation here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. I see a number of new hands up, which is fabulous. So Sean on Friday night had one Caroline Levitt, his successor, on his program, and made, I'd say by my count, at least two pieces of news. Let's roll Friday night's episode of Sean speaking to Caroline Levitt.
He's truly just a businessman who wants to do right by the American public. He's, again, speaks in layman's terms. And we love having little X around as well, who's just a total character and also feels like part of the team.
Hey, real quick, you got asked a while ago, will you attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner? Any update?
I will not be in attendance at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And that's breaking news for the Sean Spicer Show.
Oh, you guys killed the best part.
All right, one last question. I'll let you go. You ran for Congress before. There's obviously a lot of talk about your future in New Hampshire. Would you consider running again in New Hampshire?
I'm not considering that, no. It was a lot of fun.
Not rolling it.
I don't have regrets about the experience. I enjoyed it very much, but I'm good on running for office. I like this job much more.
Okay, fantastic. Caroline, thanks for everything.
So let's focus on the second thing. The other thing that happened with the media in the White House since we last met was the Gridiron Dinner, which is like a smaller, more exclusive, but also more elite annual dinner where the press and administration officials typically get together. Not only did only one cabinet member attend, and neither the president nor the vice president, but the toast, which for over 100 years at the end of the meal has been on a toast to the president, whoever the president is, went to the First Amendment. And if you're an insider, you know, if you're Judy Woodruff or who's the head of the dinner or someone like that, this is a seminal moment in American history and relations between the media and the White House. I was at a Green Bay diner this morning. I asked a bunch of people. They did not care about the toast. Sean, what's the significance of Caroline not going to the dinner and what happened at the Gridiron?
I think they're intertwined. It's a huge break from the establishment media. Too many Republicans for too long have decided to be props in the media's attempt to look like they're bipartisan or, even-handed. And I think this makes it very clear. You're on our side or you're on their side. What the toast last night that Judy Woodruff changed on Saturday night, rather, was, in my opinion, rather petty. You're not saying to President Trump, you are toasting to the President of the United States. The shift, it was sort of like, in my view, this was like battle stations. We got it. We're all going to war now. Press has made their view known. White House has made their view known. And my view is this was the sort of the bat signal to everyone on the Republican side. Choose who you're with. You're either with them, which you have the right to do in America, or you're with us. But you can't keep playing this. Republicans can't keep running around and say, oh, we have a problem with the media, and then snuggle up because there's some D-list celebrity like Billy Eichner that's hanging out at the bar and you want to go get a selfie with them. You're either on our team or their team.
Dan, you're not a journalist, and in theory, the media is not supposed to be on the side of the Democrats. What should the media do in the media's interest now? Should they pursue this what they did, getting a comedian hostile to President Trump to speak, to be the entertainment at the Correspondents' Dinner, switch the toast out of petulance or principle, whichever you wish, or should they be pursuing that kind of line, or should they rethink how they're approaching this administration?
I mean, I think it's a business issue that they should rethink it. I mean, they're basically judging the change and trying to fight and resist the change that Trump is trying to enact versus really reporting on it. And I think, you know, if you want to say, like, we are the front line to fighting Donald Trump, then you are writing off half the country. And depending on the degree to which you fight, you're probably going to write off half the Democratic Party, because some will say like this is crazy and some will say it's not enough. So look, everyone has the right to do what they want to do, but I don't see long term how they're going to survive if they really just drop any pretense of independence and just become outright hostile and resistant.
Can I just one point for history, because I know a lot of this is inside baseball for folks. But the level of damage that Eugene Daniels, formerly of Politico, now at MSNBC, did to the institution of the White House Correspondents' Dinner cannot be overstated. It will not recover from this. It will not recover. And for all of the members of the establishment media that allowed him to stay on board and lead this effort, watching it disintegrate, it's on you too. Like, the idea that they held town halls and yelled at the wall is not really a solution. This conversation started with the new White House after the election, and they chose to go down this path. He fundamentally will go down in history as the person that was the single greatest enabler of allowing that organization to die.
Can't disagree. All right. For those, I never read the chat, but I do glance at it. For those wondering about how I'm celebrating St. Patrick's Day, there you go. Man in a green hat. Young Kim, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are. Thank you for joining, being part of Two Way. What's on your mind today? And happy St. Patrick's Day.
Great. So I think I'm unmuted. Good.
Yeah, you are.
You're good.
Yep, you're great.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This is a great platform. I've been listening in. I'm actually from Chappaqua, New York, just a little bit 30 miles north of where you guys
You ever go to Lang's in Chappaqua?
No, what's Lane's? We just moved here about a year and a half ago. What is Lane's?
Lang's. It's Bill Clinton's favorite deli.
I was gonna
Right
say,
in
you
town.
guys have some interesting
No.
names.
No, the best deli's here. It's the highlight here. Is the delis. There's a place called Rocky's Deli.
Yeah, that's good too. But I'd try Lang's. Bill Clinton loves
Okay.
Lang's. I assume
We'll
it's
try
still
it,
there.
we'll
Maybe
try
it closed during COVID. Tell us what's on your mind, sir. Thank you for joining.
All right. So so my question is this, and it centers around your the table 17th that you did on Friday night. And
Thank you for watching. Wait a minute, I got to stop you there. How'd you like table 17?
In general, all your platforms have been great except for that, right? It was basically you were in a room of people with TDS syndrome, grade 5. Okay.
No, that's just not. It's not true. You obviously didn't watch closely, because we actually did a survey and asked people. There were more Trump voters in the room than Harris voters. Not overwhelmingly, but there were more Trump voters in the room. So, in any
my
event,
attention was directed towards the panelist. Like, I respected Senator Kerry tremendously until that moment, where he was embalmed, I thought, with TDS syndrome.
I'll say it again. Whether you think he has TDS or not, great opportunity for you to learn what someone as thoughtful as Bob Kerry is thinking. Right. So, in any event, go ahead. I'll stop interrupting. Go ahead.
Right, and so I guess it was more of a question to you, Mark, about you're in this other platform where it was more neutral and balanced, and now you're in a platform which was heavily centered towards
It's not.
one event. So
It's not a. It's not a platform. It's an episode.
okay.
We've
I
done
see.
episodes here with Laura Loomer. We've done episodes with all Republican guests. It's not not every episode has to have a 50-50 balance, right? And of course, 50-50 is misleading. There are people across the spectrum, and you heard on that show from the panelists who you're saying were one-sided. You heard people talk about woke and about the problems with the Democratic Party. Bob Kerrey talked about problems with the Democratic Party. So it wasn't like an anti-Trump program, even amongst the guests, and certainly not amongst the audience. So I'll just tell people, first of all, this platform's not just about politics. We're going to have shows have nothing to do with politics. So please don't send me emails saying this is a political platform. Stop having shows about other things. This is about two-way. I understand you're not saying that. I'm preempting it. That show, that particular episode, had a former Democratic senator on it. And it's true, he's mostly against Trump, but he's not uniformly for the Democratic Party either. And so that episode, there'll be other episodes where we'll have Republican guests. The whole platform is not, every episode's not going to be 50-50, right? It's an opportunity to learn situationally. We've had on this show, we've had Republican guests some days and no Democratic guests. On the evening show, some days we've had Republican guests only. So you just need to get off the notion that you're going to say, I don't like that particular show, or I didn't like that particular episode because it simply had a point of view you didn't like. And I'll say again, opportunity for you to learn. If you don't agree with Bob Kerrey, great opportunity rather than an affront to your sensibilities. And that's what makes us different from other programs. If you watch MSNBC and you're a Republican, you're just going to hear one side over and over and over again. That's not what we're about, but it does give you an opportunity to hear both sides if you watch everything we do.
Right. Yeah, at least from the panelist standpoint, it was definitely leftward tilting. That's clear.
But again, so what?
Oh, no, I'm not saying, but my question is to you, Mark. It's
Yes, sir.
it is absolutely correct, right? It's so what, but the my question to you, Mark, was like, as a moderator in this panel, how, it's not complete balance, but to poke and as a journalist, I would imagine one of your your instinct is to poke at the panelist to inform the panelist. Like, we have our own instincts and our own questions, but as a moderator, my question was,
I think I did, but come to the next episode. Come to the olive tree.
That's fair. That's fair.
And raise your hand and ask some questions. I promise you, this platform will, on its political program, will stay true to our principles. And that doesn't mean that you're going to like what every guest says or every question I ask. Just not the case. But
I don't expect it. Yeah, I don't expect that.
As you know, I'll say one more thing, and then I'll thank you for joining and for your questions. As you know, or I hope you know, there are a lot of Democrats who think this program leans right, and we have too many hands raised and questions from Republicans. Okay, that's a reality too. So everybody should just relax about every syllable of every episode, or one episode having people you don't like on it. Just relax about it. Watch the whole thing. And as I'll say for the third time, use the opportunity to learn what the rest of America is thinking. Bob Kerrey is a very thoughtful guy.
I agree.
If Bob Kerrey has negative things to say about Trump, you should be interested in them rather than say horrible episode, because all I got to hear was people attacking Trump. Thank you for joining. I hope you'll come back. Thank you. All right.
Hey, just a quick, young Kim, just a real quick PSA. If you hear of any of these folks, please let them know that the state of Minnesota has introduced legislation to make Trump derangement syndrome a mental health issue. So if they want, they can all move to Minnesota and get help.
I saw that. Phil, unmute, please. Welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind.
Good morning. I am from Massachusetts, and I'll make it real quick. I believe last week you talked about Pete Buttigieg as a possible candidate from the Democratic Party. And I gathered from the comments that because of him being gay, that was going to put a damper on that possible campaign. Here's my question. Would a conservative gay man or woman be a viable candidate if it was from the Republican Party?
Sean.
First of all, where are you from in Massachusetts?
Pretty close to where you're from, Sean. Attleboro, Massachusetts.
Oh, that's fantastic. And why are you wearing a New York shirt? Are you trying to get hurt?
No, I'm originally from Long Island.
Oh, all right. Fair enough. I think that we're entering the territory where it's growing more likely. I don't know of a prominent. I mean, obviously Rick Grinnell. I don't know that Rick would ever want to run for president. But there's not somebody off the top of my head that that is a candidate that would want to do that. But I think there's slowly, that's the one issue conservative wise that is probably, like, if you think about some of the other issues in terms of like life and Second Amendment, I think that one would probably be the first one where I think you could see a national candidate be viable. Like you could never be viable without supporting life or the Second Amendment, I don't think. Whereas I do think it's possible to get away with it.
Who's the most prominent openly gay elected Republican today? There's been one or two House members.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Ironically, this is an interesting point for all the people who hate on Trump. You've got the State Department spokesman's gay, the Pentagon spokesman's gay, the Treasury Secretary's gay, his special envoy's gay. He does a really bad job at hating on LGBTQ people. So
yeah.
I just don't, none of them are elected, to Mark's point. So I don't know. That's a good question. I just don't, I think we're getting closer, but you'd have to have somebody like a governor that got elected that it's just, we're not there on that front, on the candidate front.
Yeah. Dan.
I think the fact that there are some Republican elected officials who are gay but won't come out and say it tells you how much they think the water's warm on that topic right now.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you for coming in and asking it. We appreciate having you on the platform, Phil. I never read the chat and I don't want to waste more time on the previous question. Not that it wasn't a good question. I'll just say, I see in the chat people saying, why are you being so emotional, passionate about this? First of all, I am drinking, so that could be part of it. No, in all seriousness, it frustrates me when people misunderstand the platform. Really frustrates me. I'm going to say, I apologize for being so intense about it, but it frustrates me because it seems so obvious to me what we're trying to do here that's different, why we think it's important. And when people say, well, I watched Friday's episode and Bob Kerrey had Trump derangement syndrome. No, wrong on multiple levels. And I probably should have said it shorter and less passionately than I did. And for that, I apologize. I won't do it again, probably. All right. Frank, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Please unmute. Tell folks who don't know where you're calling from and what's on your mind.
I'm calling from Massachusetts in the North Shore near the beach.
Love that. One of my favorite places in America.
Oh, yeah. We have beautiful beaches here, so several of them. So we have greenhead season in July. So we have to go further north to Maine. Okay. So anyway, so that's that. Now I'm calling because I'm raising my hand because I watched the Cable 17 episode. And, it made me a little uncomfortable. So that was, I wanted to mention that. But what I would like to say is that I would like to have Dan get a bunch of people together and talk about the future of the Democratic Party in a serious way. This is going to take several hours, maybe several sessions or something like this. And of course, Sean should be there as well, to sort of, for a reality check. But I would like to participate in that because I think we need an opposition party, regardless of what you feel about Trump. I think we need a viable opposition party to keep people honest because of the, absolute power corrupts, right? So that's what I'd like to see. And I guess I don't really have a question. I would like to know about the Schumer story. I mean, this is just, that's just nuts. What happened? But you guys don't know. You guys are not on the inside, unfortunately. You're reporters, and you're dealing with, things that people tell you from various offices, and they have their agendas. And the kind of information we're getting is just really sort of, it's filtered through many different processes.
I actually don't think there's much. I actually don't think there's much of a mystery to what happened. But Dan addresses his second point. He doesn't like Cable 17, and he thinks we're ignorant about Chuck Schumer. But address the second point about leading a conversation.
I guess stay tuned. There's been some conversations on our end about maybe something like that, where we could be, a show focused on just the Democratic Party and bringing people in to have kind of long form, sophisticated conversations about the future of the party. So, stay tuned. And on your second part, look, we talk to people who are at the table with Senator Schumer and others. So you're right, we're not physically in the room. We are not elected officials nor senior staff anymore. But I think when you hear the same thing from 4, 5, 6 people who are, you have a pretty good sense that is likely what happened.
Sean.
I would just a couple of things. One is, I mean, obviously, yeah, even if you're in the room, by the way, because I've been in the room,
Right.
where there's plenty of times when
You
4
don't
people
know.
walk out and tell 4 different versions of what happened in the room. I think what this comes down to, in my opinion, and why I think this platform excels, is that we know we are all very well sourced in terms of on our side. Like, I will admit, I don't have a ton of people hanging out with Chuck Schumer or Richie Torres. But I do know a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people in Trump world, and I know who is trustworthy. I know who's less trustworthy. I think Dan can speak to the same. Mark obviously has a lot of sources over the years. Can I just ask you, I know this is going to sound off topic, but I thought about something over the weekend. You might be the perfect person. So are you a registered Democrat in Massachusetts, and do you participate in the primaries?
I am an independent, and I do participate in the primaries.
Okay. Would you, so I know this sounds crazy, but I really started to think about it over the weekend. Would you consider an outside the box candidate in the future, like a Mark Cuban? Would you, or a Stephen A. Smith? If they got really serious, is that far-fetched in your opinion, or is that now the kind of candidate that might be attractive to somebody who's disillusioned with what's going on?
Well, I can't speak to that. I only speak to, what I've seen in the press.
No, but Frank, I'm asking you, if Stephen A. Smith or Mark Cuban said, I want to run for president, would you want to hear what they have to say? Or would you say, you know what, you don't have the background that I'd want to? Would you take them seriously?
Well, I think that the background is sort of less important. I think the problem I have with politics is that, politicians want to get reelected. And so, we don't have good information here anywhere. When I come from DC, and when I was living in DC, I had some friends who were inside, and I had some friends who were peripheral, and we got all kinds of interesting stories from them. And that's why I like this platform, because I'm homesick, and it sort of it just reminds me of being at home in the DC area.
I'll send you some cherry blossoms in a couple of weeks.
I know. I'd love to see them, but take some pictures or something. But anyway, I'm losing my train of thought.
Would you vote for? Would you consider? Just simple. Would you consider voting for a Mark Cuban or a Stephen A. Smith, or would you say no? I'm not going to consider someone like that.
Of course, I would, because I think that the government sort of corrupts you, and I think new ideas are important. And so this is. I would, yes.
Well, that goes back to your point, and just I throw that out because I think that when that there is sort of, I mean, you think of the rise of Trump on the right, and I've always said he is a unicorn. You can't just replicate a guy that's grown up in reality television, that's got a storied business career, that's written a best-selling book. I mean, you just can't replicate that, right? He built that over time. But I do think that there's a new palette for, politically speaking, for entertaining people that aren't in the mainstream. And I don't know if the Democratic Party's there yet, but I do wonder, as you guys talk about this, whether or not that people will just say, you know what, we've tried it with the old, maybe listen to the new. Maybe it's a businessman, maybe it's a, one of these Bob Iger types or something. I don't know, but I do think that they're, there's now maybe a sense that could happen.
Frank,
sure,
thank you for coming in.
Some exposure.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Thank you for coming in. All right, I'm just going to choose somebody at random. No particular reason. Let's bring in this young lady, Patty. She looks bright. Patty, did you happen to see Table 17 just shot in the dark? Happen to see it?
Yes, I did. I
Oh,
saw
that's interesting. What did you think of it, Patty?
Well, I saw it live and then I watched the full replay. The full replay was excellent because the sound was better and I got to experience the fantastic band. I mean, you'll get me as an Italian with a mandolin any day, and The Godfather. I thought personally, I enjoyed it. I did not agree with everyone's perspective, but there was something about it that made me feel like I was there. I was enjoying an evening with a bunch of people. It was different than our usual format, which to me was fun. I thought the perspectives I enjoyed was the owner of the restaurant. I thought he had some very good input.
No, Noam Dorman is a genius.
He just was terrific. So I guess you could, and I voted for Trump, but I felt like it was fun.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you, Patty. Besides adding an alternative voice to those who didn't like it, is there anything else you'd like to ask this morning?
Yes, I would. I would like to ask Sean if he would put in a good word for me, because I think you should have an average American on the board at the Kennedy Center, and I'm volunteering.
Ooh.
Well, I will
right.
say this, you might be $1 short on that one, because in the president's truth the other day, he said, we are now complete. So obviously I'm not familiar with the board structure per se, but at least in that truth, he said, we are now full.
Next round, Patty. Next round.
All
Thank you
right,
for coming on.
next time.
Thank you for your kind words. Sorry about the audio on the live version. That'll be
That's all
fixed
right.
going forward. Thank you, Patty. All right, Lauren, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind, please.
Hey, I'm in Oklahoma City. I had a question about immigration from a business owner's point of view. I own a business, and since everybody talks about immigration and letting illegal immigrants come across the border in Mexico, but what they don't talk about is the effect that it just seems like the country really needs a lot more people. I know people all across the United States with businesses, vendors that we use, other business owners in my same industry who can't find people. And it's not just the lowest wage people that we're looking for, like people in, six-figure range, 50, 60, 80,000, $150,000 range, where it's hard to find enough people. And I think my point of view, from a business owner's point of view, we need to let a lot more people immigrate into the United States. And what is what is happening with that? I think the tariffs are obviously going to cause some inflation. I'm okay with some of that if we can figure out the people side. I just don't know what needs to happen with that. I'd love to hear Sean and Dan and Mark's point of view on that.
Brilliant question, Lauren. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue on the low end, right? Who's going to pick the fruit on the farms? It's not a case of like there's tons of Americans lined up to do some of these jobs. So a lot of working class jobs are filled by hardworking immigrants. And on the high end, as you say, it is another huge issue. Because what tends to happen, let's say with technology companies, is if they can't get you into the United States, they will put you in Vancouver or Germany or Israel or somewhere else, and you'll work for, let's say, Google. Well, what happens then is after 5 or 10 years or so, you leave and you go start your own company. I mean, that's the kind of classic tried and true tale of technology. And that company then ends up starting in Vancouver or Berlin or Israel, not in the United States. And so it's not, an issue of like, can they find just anyone? We want the best, right? It's what makes America great. It's one of the reasons we're so innovative and entrepreneurial. So I actually think Donald Trump agrees with that second part. I think there are some around him like Stephen Miller who do not. And so we'll just have to see how they square it.
Sean.
So, Lauren, can I just ask what's the field that you're in? I mean, industry wise.
I'm a dentist. I own 20 plus dental offices around the Midwest. But it's not just dentistry. And so when I talk about like high paid jobs, it's dentists, it's hygienists, it's also accountants, it's attorneys, like all the people that I interact with in my business. a lot of it are, you know, jobs that require certificates or licenses. Like a lot of these industries have such a tight hold on who can get, you know, positions. And so anyway, yeah, it's a lot of different
Right. No,
industries that seem to have a problem.
It's interesting because I have a 4:20 appointment today, and I know that the hygienist aspect has always been a problem, at least here in Northern Virginia, of getting qualified and trained folks. I would say this, and the reason I ask that is because I think there is a bit of a difference in terms of the certification of some of those folks. It's not like, you know, but your point is well taken. Let's just leave it at that. I think what we need to have is a realistic review of our entire policy. Who are we letting in? What are we getting for them? I mean, Dan's right. To some extent, I want people to come here on a student visa and stay and create jobs. I want them to build here. I want them to put their company down and invest in America. I want the best and the brightest. And the question is, do we have that system in place? Because I don't think we do. And the question is, what are we requiring in response for that? There's a difference between a visa and citizenship, as we all know. I mean, so I think there needs to be a holistic review of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we're getting in return. As Marco Rubio was talking about over the weekend, it is a privilege and to come to this country on a visa. And so we need to start thinking about what are the kind of folks that we're bringing in? What are we asking of them? How long are they going to stay? And so I get your point on the workers, but I think there's also a bigger problem at stake. And this is a fight that I discussed. I think we're on a little bit of a hiatus over the Christmas break holiday, but Bannon and Elon Musk went back and forth on H-1Bs. And I think there is a fundamental issue, which is, are we actually creating the environment to help Americans achieve that, right? So for example, the tech industry, are they investing enough in our community colleges and in our institutions to help grow Americans into those positions, as opposed to the default just being, oh, we got to go overseas to India or to Asia and bring these people in for a short term? What are we doing to invest in America to grow Americans into or give them the training and the education necessary? It's not a one quick answer. I think there's a bigger look at what we need to take over, what we need to do holistically.
Lauren, thank you. Great question. And I love your entrepreneurial building there. Thank you, sir. All right. We got 4 programs to tell you about all today. 2 at 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 at 6 o'clock Eastern. So you can watch 3 of the 4 of them on demand. Sean, what do you have coming up tonight?
Chicks on the Right tonight to break it all down. And then tomorrow, Brendan Carr of the FCC.
Great. All right. Let me tell you about a couple programs here on 2-Way tonight, both at 5 p.m. Eastern time. First, Megan's program, Happy Hour with Megan McCain. Special guests, Michael Ian Black and Clay Aiken. They both happen to be Democrats. Okay. Megan's not, but they both happen to be Democrats. I got my Nokia. I'll take a break to just show you the Nokia. Looks good, right? Thank you, sir. So Megan's show 5 o'clock on here on 2-Way. Don't miss it. Then also at 5 o'clock, I will be hosting David Bonson, sponsor of 2-Way Tonight and a great economic expert. David and I will be talking about the markets. David will talk about what he thinks is going on now and what, if you're thinking about changing your investment portfolio or whether you should stand pat with what you have. David and I will talk about it. We'll take your questions on the markets. Anything you want to ask about the markets. The only way to watch that, though, is not on YouTube or X. You can only watch it on the 2-Way platform, and you must register if you want to attend this session to talk about the markets and David's sense of where things are headed. Go to 2way.tv/TBG for the Bonson Group, 2way.tv/TBG to sign up. And then finally, at 6 o'clock tonight, I'll be on with 2-Way Tonight, Eastern Time. Our guests, Amber Duke of The Spectator. She's from the right. Adam Mockler of Midas Touch on the left. 2 people who are very smart, very savvy, very principled, and we're going to have a civil conversation. And I bet some of you on the left don't like what some of what Amber says, and I bet some of you on the right don't like what Adam said. Guess what? Not only no problem with that, you should look forward to it. So 4 programs, Sean at 6, 2-Way Tonight at 6, and then at 5 Eastern earlier, David Bonson and I will be in colloquy, and you can watch Megan with her 2 great guests, Michael Ian Black and Clay Aiken, both of whom I've heard on the air. They're both fabulous. So stay tuned for that. And then the 3 of us will be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Sean, closing statement. You have 10 seconds.
Travel safe.
And Dan, your closing statement, 10 seconds.
We'll see you tomorrow at 9.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching.
Happy
I'll
St.
be enjoying-
Patrick's Day.
No, that's
Happy
right.
St. Patrick's
Sorry.
Day. I'll be enjoying my gnocchi in
Lunch.
peace. Have a great day, everybody.